History remembers the flames, it forgets the hands that carried the scrolls away. A city by the sea goes quiet. Waves keep moving. Smoke rises. People point to the fire and say, that is when the library died. But what if the real story began before the smoke? What if the shelves were already thinner? What if the most dangerous ideas were already gone? Packed, sealed, moved, long before anyone smelled ash? We talk about burning because burning is easy to see. Flames are loud. Shibamash is final. Fire gives us a clean ending. But knowledge does not vanish all at once. It leaks. It fades. It is lifted by careful hands and walked out a side door when no one is looking. Imagine a scroll in a quiet room. A scribe finishes a copy. A curator checks a list. A visitor from far away makes a request. Another hand writes a note, to be returned. And then, it is not. Who was that visitor? A scholar? A priest? A collector? A messenger with a seal from a powerful house? Who signed the paper? Who turned the key? Who decided that this one scroll does not belong to the world anymore? Now pause the fire. Go back years, even decades. Picture a long table where decisions are made. Which works are copied first? Which authors are praised? Which ideas are labeled unreliable, unsafe, or simply not urgent? How many small choices does it take to steer a library away from itself? A library is not just a building full of books. It is a memory with rules. Keep this. Delay that. Replace those copies. If you can control the rules, you can control what survives. They say Alexandria gathered the world. Ships were searched for books. Scribes copied what they found. But gathering is only half the story. What you do after you gather, that decides what futures are possible. Think of the catalog, the master list that tells you what exists. Lose a book, and you lose a page. Lose the catalog, and you lose the idea of a book. A name, a title, a path to find it. If a title disappears from the list, does the world ever even know it is missing? Fire destroys, but absence confuses. Absence makes us doubt our own questions. Maybe that text never existed. Maybe that map was a rumor. Maybe that diagram was a myth. Listen closely to the room again. Footsteps in the corridor. A door that opens at hours when doors should be shut. A crate that leaves at dawn labeled for repair, for study, for the king, for the temple, for the archive, temporary. Temporary becomes permanent. The receipt is misplaced. The witness is reassigned. The shelf looks full enough to fool the eye, and outside the world believes the library is safe. Who benefits from a quiet removal? A ruler who wants a certain story told. A priest who guards a certain truth. A scholar who wants a reputation no one can challenge. A merchant who understands that rare things are worth more when they are rare because no one else can find them. We love clean endings. We love to say it burned and that was that. But history is rarely one night. It is many nights, many chances to move one scroll, then another, until a hall of learning becomes an echo of itself. What would be worth stealing first? Not the common texts, not the poems everyone knows by heart. You take the lists, the charts, the only copy of a map with a coastline drawn wrong in a way that later proved right. A commentary that fixes an error in an older authority. A set of notes on light and lenses that makes the world look new. A letter between great minds that shows how ideas really moved. You do not need to erase a people to erase their place in the story. You only need to remove the things that prove they were first. Now think of the timing. A period of unrest, a change of rulers, a decree no one understands, a street rumor that says something big is coming. These are the perfect nights, the perfect cover. When a city watches the horizon, men with keys can empty a shelf. Years pass. New copies fill the gaps. Readers do not notice that the new version is not the same as the old. A margin note is missing. A chapter title changes. A line that questioned too boldly becomes a line that praises too safely. When the final crisis arrives, when the crowd gathers, when soldiers shout, when fear runs through the streets, the building becomes a symbol. But symbols are late. Symbols are what we make after we have already lost the thing itself. Ask yourself, if you plan to take the rarest scrolls, would you wait for fire? Or would you go before the fire while the shelves still look normal, while the catalog still says everything is fine? Somewhere, a ship's captain signs for a sealed chest. Somewhere, a private room opens that the public never knew existed. Somewhere, a scholar builds a career on quotations from a text no one else can see. Somewhere, a temple or court gains a new treasure and writes a rule that it must never leave. And the city by the sea goes on. Markets open, students argue, scribes keep copying. The library seems eternal because it is busy. Busy is not eternal, busy can hide loss. We like to picture a single blaze because a blaze is dramatic. But the story behind the blaze is smaller, quieter, and more dangerous. It is the story of people who understood that ideas are worth more than gold. It is the story of patient hands that remove the future, one tube of papyrus at a time. If knowledge is power, then the most powerful people will always want the rarest knowledge kept close, not shared, not debated, not placed on a public shelf. Kept, guarded, used. So when you hear about the fire, remember the steps that led to it. Remember the list that went missing. Remember the loans that never came back. Remember the copies that were not the same as the originals. Remember the quiet years when the library smiled for visitors while its best thoughts were walking out the door. Because the question that matters is not how high were the flames, it is how empty were the shelves before the flames. And if the shelves were already lighter, then the next question is heavier still. Where did the scrolls go? Across the sea to rival collections? Down into private rooms under familiar buildings? Into the hands of courts and sanctuaries that keep secrets by calling them sacred? Listen to the sea again. The waves keep moving. The fire will come later. But the story you are about to hear begins now, with the city that collected the world and the quiet choices that made its memory easy to steal. Let's step into Alexandria, not as tourists, but as if we've just arrived in a world where information is power, and power is guarded like gold. The air smells of salt and papyrus. The harbor is alive with shouts in a dozen languages, sails snapping in the wind, and wooden cranes swinging crates of silk, spices, and marble ashore. But here, the most valuable cargo is invisible. It isn't the grain from Egypt's fertile fields or the ivory from Africa's interior. It's the words, the ideas, the secrets carried in scrolls hidden in the holds of ships. Every vessel entering Alexandria was subject to an unusual rule: surrender your books, not as punishment, but as tribute. Officials would seize every text, poems, laws, maps, treatises, and carry them to the library's scribes. The originals would be copied with speed and precision, and then the copies would be returned to the owners. The originals, those would stay in Alexandria's vaults. Piece by piece, the city was absorbing the intellectual DNA of the ancient world. It wasn't just a library, it was a living organism. Its shelves breathed in stories from Greece, Babylon, India, China, and lands so far their names sounded like myths. Here, scholars debated under colonnades, studied the heavens from observatories, and compared maps that hinted at continents no one had yet seen. Astronomers plotted the motion of the planets. Mathematicians worked out the geometry that would shape buildings for centuries. Physicians experimented with cures whose recipes are now lost. But in a city where so much was gained, something began to slip away. At first, it was unnoticed, like a subtle change in the tide, a scroll missing from its usual place, a record gone without a note, a body of manuscripts moved to a private chamber and never returned. The library was built on the idea that knowledge should be gathered and preserved. But knowledge is also dangerous. Not everyone wanted all truths to be shared. Some scrolls might have contained embarrassing state secrets, maps revealing military vulnerabilities, or histories that contradicted official stories. Others may have held forbidden teachings, mathematics that challenged religion, or medical techniques considered unnatural. And so the great machine began to hum with a quieter rhythm, not just taking in knowledge but letting it leak out, deliberately and without fire. Someone, or perhaps several someones, were removing scrolls before disaster could ever touch them. No blaze, no smoke, no broken shelves, just absence. Imagine walking into a room you've known your whole life and sensing something has changed, but you can't name it. That's what it was like for the keepers of the library. The rows of papyrus still stood tall, the ink still smelled faintly fresh, but the heartbeat of the place, the completeness, was faltering, and no one knew who was behind it or where the taken knowledge had gone. Later, centuries later, people would argue about the fire, the one that blackened history and left the library as a ghost in memory. But by the time flames ever touched those shelves, some of its most precious treasures were already gone. And this raises the question that will follow us deeper into this mystery. If the fire wasn't the only thief, then who was the first? Who, in a city built to collect the world's wisdom, had the power and the reason to take it away before the rest of us ever had the chance to read it? If you want, I can now write the next section so this smoothly flows into the investigation of who might have been behind this pre-fire disappearance. That will keep the tension alive and the pacing strong. Imagine walking into the greatest library in the ancient world. Marble floors stretch out before you, polished smooth by centuries of footsteps. Scrolls are stacked high in cedar-lined rooms, their faint smell of ink and papyrus thick in the air. Somewhere deep inside, there's a room most visitors will never see. It doesn't hold the oldest scrolls or the most precious manuscripts. It holds something far more powerful. The catalog, the master list, the Pinakes. This was the heart of the Library of Alexandria, the map to its treasure. Without it, the scrolls become just endless shelves of parchment. With it, you could find any author, any subject, any fragment of wisdom gathered from across the known world. The Pinakes told you what existed, where it was kept, and who had written it. It was knowledge about knowledge. Now imagine that list disappearing. No flames, no smoke, no drama. Just one day, gone. The scrolls might still be there, but they would be as good as lost. How do you search for something you no longer know exists? How do you recover the voice of an author whose very name has been erased from memory? That's the terrifying truth about libraries. They can be silenced without a single page being burned. If the index fades, so does history. It doesn't take a fire to kill knowledge. It takes forgetting where it lives. And the Pinakes, if placed in the wrong hands, could do just that. Who controlled it? Not just any scribe. This catalog was curated by scholars, men trusted by the rulers of Egypt. They decided what got copied, what was worth preserving, and quietly what was left to vanish in the dust. Each choice they made shaped the story of human civilization. Imagine if someone, for reasons of politics, pride, or secrecy, decided to make certain names disappear. Whole bodies of work could slip into nothingness without anyone noticing. And here's the darker thought. What if the Pinakes didn't just vanish into obscurity? What if it was taken, removed from the library before the flames ever came? A single person walking away with it could rewrite the record of humanity. They wouldn't need to destroy the scrolls themselves. They could simply make them invisible. Without the map, no one would know they were there to be found. Was this what happened in Alexandria? Did someone see the fire coming and act, not to save the scrolls, but to claim the catalog for themselves? Or was it stolen long before the final disasters, hidden away by a rival empire eager to possess the crown jewel of human knowledge? We don't know, but we do know this. Once the Pinakes was gone, the library's memory was broken, and a library without memory is already dead. And so we're left with a haunting possibility, that the greatest loss in Alexandria wasn't the fire itself, but the quiet theft of its mind. The scrolls that vanished before the flames might never have been destroyed at all. They could still be out there, scattered in private collections or locked in vaults, their existence erased from the only list that could prove they were real. The question is, who knew the value of that list well enough to take it, and what were they trying to hide? They tell the story as if it happened in one night. One great fire, flames swallowing centuries of knowledge in a single tragic moment. It's a neat image, a clean disaster. But history is rarely so tidy. The truth is, Alexandria didn't die in one blaze. It bled out slowly over centuries through many wounds, and each of those wounds was an opportunity for something else to happen. Imagine this, a city at the edge of an empire's patience, governors replaced, armies marching in and out, mobs gathering in the streets, decrees from far-off rulers that no one in Alexandria truly wanted to follow. Each crisis became a distraction, and distractions are the perfect cover for quiet hands. In those moments, no one would notice a few crates rolling toward the harbor at night. No one would question a handful of scrolls being borrowed for safekeeping. And if they did, who would remember years later that those scrolls never came back? You see, a single fire can be seen from miles away, but slow theft, slow disappearance, that's invisible. It doesn't make the sky glow red. It doesn't send panic crowds running into the streets. It just happens, piece by piece. And Alexandria faced more than one moment when that could happen. There were riots between pagan and Christian factions. There were imperial purges when certain texts were declared dangerous or heretical. There were Roman wars, Byzantine crackdowns, and the quiet but deliberate censorship of knowledge that didn't fit the vision of the rulers of the day. Each event was a chance to clean the library, not by fire but by selection. Take the scrolls they wanted, replace them with harmless copies or empty shelves masked by neatly arranged documents of lesser value. To anyone walking through, it would still look full, a treasury of wisdom. But it wouldn't be the same treasury. It's almost like the slow turning of a lock, one click at a time until the door is open. And when it finally swings wide, the room behind it isn't empty because it burned. It's empty because it's been emptied, quietly, patiently. Think about it. If the library's most dangerous or valuable scrolls were removed decades before the so-called final fire, the blaze itself becomes the perfect story, the perfect excuse. Everyone believes the knowledge was lost to the flames. No one asks where it really went. And that raises an unsettling question. Did the fire destroy the treasures of Alexandria? Or did it destroy only what was left behind, the scraps, the decoys, the shells of a once great collection? If that's true, then somewhere, perhaps far from Egypt, the words of ancient mathematicians, astronomers, physicians, and philosophers might have survived, hidden in secret archives, passed down through private collections, or locked away in vaults where only the chosen few could see them. When we picture the burning of the Library of Alexandria, we mourn a single tragedy. But what if the real tragedy is that the fire was just the end of a long game, one that started years earlier in the shadows? A game where the winner wasn't the one who set the fire, but the one who walked away with the knowledge long before the smoke ever rose. The Library of Alexandria is the headline everyone remembers. But behind the curtain of history, there was another vault of knowledge, quieter, more selective, more elusive. The Serapeum. Think of it not as a public library, but as a locked, dimly lit study where only the most trusted hands could turn the pages. This was Alexandria's second door, the place where the rarest scrolls slept. But here's the puzzle. If the flames, the politics, or the shifting tides of power threatened the great library, what happened to the treasures in this other one? Knowledge that could move civilizations doesn't just vanish. It moves, it hides, it survives. Picture the royal book rooms, sealed behind polished wooden doors, their shelves lined with works too valuable to share with the masses. Imagine the scholar circles, small gatherings of men and women whose debates shaped entire schools of thought. Then see the wealthy collectors, merchants, nobles, rulers from far-off lands, willing to pay or bargain for even a single rare scroll. Some of these works could leave the city in the most respectable way possible, as diplomatic gifts. A ruler sends a ship not just with gold, but with the wisdom of philosophers, the formulas of engineers, the maps of seas yet to be crossed. Others might have left less honorably, stolen, smuggled, or borrowed with no intention of return. And some might have been taken as trophies of war, the spoils of a victorious army that knew the value of ink as well as iron. Ideas, like water, have no loyalty. They flow toward whoever can hold them, shape them, or protect them. And in the ancient world, that meant they followed power, money, and secrecy. If a scroll could save a dynasty, strengthen a navy, or inspire a prophet, it would find its way into the right or wrong hands. So where could these priceless works have gone? Across the Mediterranean to rival libraries in Pergamon or Rome? Inland along trade routes to private archives buried deep in palaces? Or perhaps they never left Alexandria at all, tucked instead into hidden chambers beneath temples, sealed away behind stone doors, waiting for a future that might never come. And this is the haunting part. We may have walked above them. Beneath the cobblestones of modern streets, under familiar buildings, there could still be rooms where the dust of 2,000 years lies on shelves no one has touched since the day the doors closed. The trail is thin, the evidence scattered, but the question refuses to die. If the second door opened when the first was lost, then the scrolls of the Serapeum may not be gone. They may just be somewhere else. They say a fire is blind, it devours everything in its path without thought, without mercy. But the destruction of the Library of Alexandria was not the blind hunger of flame alone. Some things, it seems, were not left to burn by accident. They were taken, chosen, removed before the ash could swallow them. Think about it. In a collection so vast, so ancient, not every scroll would hold the same weight. Some were simple records, harvest lists, tax accounts, faded poems sung in small villages. But others were dangerous. Not because they could kill a man, but because they could change the world he lived in. These were the ones worth stealing. Imagine maps drawn long for the world you know, maps that showed shorelines that no longer exist, coastlines reshaped by time and tide. Imagine if you could see, in ink and parchment, a world that contradicted every known chart, islands where none should be, continents that official history insists were never there. Such maps would not just guide sailors, they would guide empires. Whoever held them and could claim new lands, control trade routes, and rewrite geography itself. And there were star lists, precise mathematical records of the night sky. Some corrected mistakes in older charts. Others hinted at patterns and movements our own astronomers still debate today. They told of stars visible in ancient times but now vanished, or obscured by the slow drift of the heavens. To hold such a chart was to hold a key to time itself, to measure history not by human memory, but by the movement of the cosmos. In dusty alcoves sat medical treatises, methods and cures our modern science barely understands. Instructions on treating diseases thought incurable, formulas for pain relief made from plants now extinct, surgical techniques performed with tools we can't identify. What if these texts describe ways to repair the body that we've yet to rediscover? In the wrong hands, they could become a monopoly on life itself. And then there were the manuals, diagrams of machines that could lift stones heavier than armies could move, designs for lenses and mirrors that could bend light in strange ways, concentrating it into a single burning point, or spreading it to illuminate the darkness. These were not idle curiosities. They were blueprints for power. Technology that, if revealed at the right time, could leap a civilization centuries forward, or leave others centuries behind. But perhaps the most fragile treasures were not made of invention or measurement, but of thought. Plays, epics, and tragedies whose words had the power to shape a people's soul. Strange philosophies that dared to ask questions no one wanted answered. Proto-histories, records of times before history officially began, filled with events that did not fit the neat timelines carved by rulers and scholars. These were ideas, not just objects. Ideas that could unsettle a nation, dissolve a religion, or unseat a king. If you wanted control, these are the scrolls you would take first, the ones that shift the boundaries of the possible, that change how people see the world and what they believe can be done. Once removed, they could be hidden, traded, guarded, or destroyed. And the world, unaware of their absence, would go on believing the smaller version of reality it was left with. So when the flames came, or the soldiers, or the thieves, ask yourself, what truly vanished that day? Was it everything? Or was it only what someone decided we should never see again? Power rarely announces itself with a shout. It works in whispers, in the quiet turning of a key, in the gentle closing of a door that will never open again. And when it comes to the erasure of knowledge, power doesn't need to smash or scatter. It only needs to make sure the right people never see the right pages. Ask yourself, who gains when a scroll vanishes, when a manuscript is locked away, when a shelf once heavy with truth stands empty? History gives us the answer over and over again. Kings and emperors whose fragile authority rests on the illusion that they alone hold the keys to the past. If their lineage, their conquests, or their divine right is challenged by a document, that document cannot survive. It becomes dangerous not because of what it says, but because of who might read it. High priests and theologians guarding not just their gods, but their interpretations of the divine. One page that contradicts the sacred story can unravel centuries of control. Easier to declare it heretical, dangerous, and then see it vanish. Merchants and collectors, whose fortunes grow each time a rare text passes into private hands. They are not thieves in the common sense. They pay, they trade, they bargain. But once that book crosses their threshold, it is no longer for the world. It becomes a jewel locked in a chest, shown to a select few, and remembered only in rumors. Even scholars, men and women sworn to the pursuit of truth, have played their part. A source no one else can access becomes a crown of prestige. A translation hoarded for decades builds a career. In the end, ambition can be as potent a thief as greed. The method is deceptively simple. Remove the original, replace it with a copy, altered, abbreviated, or subtly rearranged. Let time smooth over the differences until no one remembers what was missing. A rumor will replace a citation. A story told often enough will stand in for the evidence itself. And when the trail has grown cold, then, if it suits the moment, a fire can finish the job. That's the cruel poetry of it. By the time the flames rise, the shelves are already empty. The fire becomes the public culprit, a neat, clean explanation for why nothing remains. And the world mourns a loss that had already happened long before the first spark. Think of the Library of Alexandria. Most imagine it as one cataclysmic blaze, a single tragic night when the ancient world's knowledge turned to smoke. But the truth is far more unsettling. The loss was not a single moment. It was a slow bleed. Scrolls disappearing quietly over decades, lifted into private collections, carried across borders, copied and altered, until the heart of the library was hollow. When the fire finally came, it burned the shell. This is not just ancient history. The same motives still walk among us. In archives, in universities, in governments, in the deep corners of the internet. Documents vanish, sometimes in plain sight. Not destroyed, but relocated, shifted from public reach into privated shadow. And always there are the quiet winners. Perhaps right now, somewhere in a room without windows, lit only by a single lamp, a pair of gloved hands is turning a page you will never see. The words may be centuries old, written by a mind long turned to dust, yet they live still, in exile. And so we are left with a haunting thought. Absence can be engineered. Silence can be built. And once enough time passes, we stop asking what was taken. The Library of Alexandria may have burned, but the more chilling truth is this. The fire was not the thief. The absence was planned. The gaps in our memory were drawn like maps. And in some locked chamber, parts of that memory may still breathe. If this unsettles you, let it. Let the questions rise. Let the unease push you further into the shadows, where truth waits, not in what survived, but in what was taken. Because some silences are not empty. They are heavy, full of hidden pages. And the only way to find them is to keep walking deeper into the dark with us, where history's stolen breath still lingers.